everyone, welcome back to an episode of the Coach's Corner. Today I've got with me Sara Clark, Aniela Larson, and David Wallace joining from all parts of North America. And we're here today to talk about adaptive leadership. And we hope for an energetic conversation as usual. We'll be a little off the cuff as usual, but I did want to start out with a little bit of a hypothesis, which is the best leaders, and I don't mean managers or people who are your direct, reporting line, but the best leaders are the ones who read the room and their own emotions, and they have a better sense of things before they actually make a move, make a statement, make some sort of declaration out into the organization, and that can lead to better clarity. And we might think about that as kind of leading out loud and kind of just sensing what's happening around us as leaders. And I'll tell you a short story. This morning, I was very tired. I've been traveling for the last 3 weeks, and at 7:15 this morning, I was asked to give a presentation at 8 a.m. this morning that I was not prepared for. And so I started that presentation off by just saying out loud that I was really tired and had been on a flight with lots of screaming children the night before, to just kind of give myself and the audience some perspective about where I was coming from. And so I'm curious where some of you may have seen leaders either do things similar, or what your experiences have been when leaders are able to sense their environment for themselves and how they adapt to make sure that they're building clarity. Let's kick it to Aniela first.
The one part that sticks with me about what you said, Kim, was about naming it, like naming where we are and how helpful that is, right? Like when the team around you doesn't need to guess where you are or what you're thinking, like that's really helpful for them. So it kind of minimizes and mitigates that level of uncertainty around, like, is this because of me? Did I do something? Or is this the leader? And so I love just that. I know I'm not answering your question, but that's what I was kind of stuck on.
Yeah. Sara and David, any perspectives?
Yeah, I like that you set a example of being transparent about where your state was, because that gives permission for other people in the future to do the same thing. And I think that's one of the really important things for leaders to do, is to let people know, like, hey, we want you to be honest about what you're struggling with or where you are. And so I think that was a really good example of how you can set that example. Like, it also like lets the people you're talking to know, hey, this is where I'm coming from, this is what I've been experiencing, but also sets that example for them for the future.
Yeah, that creating the environment for, I'm going to use a big word, psychological safety is a big part of our role as leaders. And Sara has coached me quite a bit on naming things. So I love that Aniela picked up on that. Sara, I'm curious what you think.
Well, I think that there's a couple pieces here that we have that interplay. So when we name things in the environment, that can take away some of the scariness of them. I think in a presentation mode, we also want to know that if we name it, that's going to be on people's minds. So they might see it more of like, oh yeah, Kim sounds tired now. But as Aniela put it, it's like it gives them the interpretation. What is the proper or most accurate interpretation to your reality, so that they have a behavior and they have like the meaning to add behind it.
Curious your all's perspectives on whether you've coached leaders or seen them do a great job at identifying what's happening non-verbally from their teams so that they can respond to that.
I will say that the most successful leaders that I've seen in identifying what's happening non-verbally in the environment have had experience living in a culture where that is the dominant way of being, so that they have more ability to cross between cultural norms. And I think that this is something that we can learn. So I've heard leaders, I've heard supervisors say like, oh, like I have trouble with that. Like I miss what people are saying. Like this indirect communication thing like is just really hard. I need them to put it into words. That might be true for where we are right now, and it's a skill that we can learn of starting to read, like practicing. Okay, I'm going to watch, maybe in my TV show, I'm going to watch what is the emotional tone happening in this conversation. I'm going to watch this time just for body language. I'm going to watch this time just for word choice. I'm going to watch just for inconsistency between the word choice and the body language and emotional tone. So we can take time to practice this and to develop our ability to read the room better.
I think there's watching for visual cues is huge. Active listening even plays a part in that, but it's not only listening with your ears, is what I hear you saying. It's listening with all of your senses.
And if we're from a context in which we've been trained to just focus on the words, then this actually takes practice to be able to start to pick up these other pieces.
David, any experiences you've had there?
Well, again, I was going to say something different. But what I wanted to call out, Kim, was actually just you demonstrating and describing your story. You came in, you weren't prepared, you were told you have to prepare in 45 minutes. Like, wow. So, wow, what a great example of adaptive leadership, right? You did it, you rolled with the punches, you pulled something together, and then you named it. So I just think that like that in its entirety shows really good kind of attunement to the needs of the organization, but also the needs of the people that the organization kind of houses.
In typical fashion, we went down a rabbit hole, but we'll circle back. David, what were you thinking?
And what I was thinking was how this is somewhat tangential. I was thinking about how much this has changed, at least in my experience, over the last 5 or 6 years since I've been working fully remote. Because it's very different when you're trying to pick up on those cues just from looking at people on a video screen, who some of them may have their camera off, and being able to figure out from sometimes the silence what they're feeling or what they're thinking and how things are going. So it's not only being able to pick up on the cues that you see, but also the cues that you don't see. And that has been a huge shift over the last few years for me as I've been working more remote.
I think that's a great call out, right? Like, even if we have people with their cameras on who are visibly present, who are communicating, we can still only see everyone from here up, right? So, what's happening with their hand gestures? Are they distracted by something that's happening on another screen? And so, what are some techniques that you have all kind of either demonstrated for leaders or used yourselves when you were in a leadership position that kind of pull out those silences?
I do this a lot, sometimes to the detriment. Sarah has called me out on this in the past too. But I'm very clear around, hey, we just started this meeting. One of the things that I need, and so I say it like as my needs, is I really like to see people because I really like to engage with the individual behind the call. So that is one of those things that I do is like I just name it straight from the get-go and I ask, hey, can everybody be on camera? And actually, if the room size permits, off mute, because that allows for more of that closeness. Anybody else?
Actually, recently, at my last company, I helped lead the neurodiversity ERG. And one of the things that I learned, I just got diagnosed as ADHD a couple of years ago. And one of the things I've learned is there are a lot of neurodiverse people who have more trouble paying attention when their camera is on. And so I have started adjusting to saying like, hey, if you're comfortable turning your camera on, please turn it on. If you're not, that's perfectly fine. However, I am more likely to call on you to try to get you to participate if I'm not hearing your voice. And sometimes I will even like make notes of who's in the call and just put a little mark every time I hear them talk so that if I see there's a name without a mark on it, I can call on that person when the time's appropriate to get them to speak up.
Yeah, I think that the design of our meetings is also really important here, because we can design it in a way, if we start with something that engages people where they all need to contribute some way in the chat or verbally. And I think we see this when we send people to breakout rooms. When they come back, they're more likely to have their camera on. And so can we work that into the meeting where people have 5 minutes to go discuss a thing and then bring that back? And then also working on our relationships outside of that large context. What relationship do we have with that person who always has their camera off? Do we have a one-on-one relationship with them? If not, maybe that's something that we need to foster.
So taking this kind of to leaders and their role in setting the stage or the creating the environment for vulnerability to be okay and things like that. How have you, again, either seen or demonstrated or struggled with a leader who didn't bring their whole selves to the environment? And how did that affect the environment itself? Where did you see that maybe create some sort of bottleneck in some way or some other issue?
There's a lot of examples I have where they haven't brought it. And so actually that in a sense is causing a challenge for me to answer the question, because depending on the context, the impact can be a little bit different. But the one that I think of as one of the biggest challenges for many leaders is the town hall, and how they, generally speaking, show up in a very manicured, professional, A4, you can ask me these things, but don't go ask me about those things kind of way. I think that's where I've seen it fall down a lot, and to probably the detriment of their ability to lead their teams. When it shows up a little bit rigid, a little bit kind of protective, the questions will be asked. That chatter will be had. What are they hiding? Why are they not able to relate to me on this way? Why is it so? Why is there that power distance?
I will double down on that answer. That is something I saw a lot in my previous organization too. And it was when you're hiding it or holding back information, your audience can tell, especially if you're the manager of that team. They can tell when you're holding back or when you're being fully transparent. And so what I have found is if a leader says, hey, I've got more information than I can share, but I'm going to share with you what I can, and are just willing to be open about that and honest about that up front, then people obviously are going to be wondering, like, well, I wonder what they're not sharing, but at least they know that they're sharing what they can, and that they'll get, it just builds that trust better. But yeah, I think that was a great call on the holding back information.
You mentioned, Kim, this bringing our authentic selves or being our whole selves. And I think that there's a balance to find around. I know when I was younger and first in official leadership positions, I actually kind of overshared too much. And Brene Brown has some great work around this of like identifying like, why are we sharing? Being intentional, being clear, like, I want to bring this part of myself to this situation. I want to bring this information to this situation, and I'm doing so as a choice. And this is why I'm doing that. So that if we share things and the audience has a shocked response, that might have been too much. And so there's somewhere in there where we can be ourselves, but it's being our authentic selves, but also an intentional self.
Yeah, I've had someone who I coach recently said to me, I thought you were definitely going to yell at me after I shared this thing in a meeting. So definitely having awareness of what sharing is doing to the audience is super important, Sarah. Couldn't agree more. So as we think about kind of adapting your leadership style, Sarah, what does that mean to you?
I really see it as us attempting to adapt to the style that's going to work for the person who has less power. So if we're or less ability to adapt. So if we're in an official and a leadership role where we're a supervisor, it's being aware of the norms and the comfort zones of the people that we're supervising and doing our best to shift to that or name when we can't. Be like, I know you would prefer this way. However, I need to share it in this other way for this reason. And the more that we can do that, I think the more information can flow within our organization, the more people are able to speak rather than just forcing people to do it our way.
I want to hear more what you have to say and also what's required to be able to be an adaptive leader.
Yeah. I think one thing is being we talk about reading the room, but what about reading the internal environment that's going on? And for me, I think a big piece has been getting to know my body and the signals it's sending. So my jaw will get tight before I consciously know that I'm irritable or frustrated. And so if I can catch my signals as they're coming up in my body before they're escalated, then that means I can take a pause, like, ooh, I'm frustrated right now. Oh, okay. And get a little more centered, a little more present to then be able to tune into like what's going on in this dynamic. What do I need to do next?
I love that as you said that, and I looked at, we all took a deep breath in. Like as coaches, we're trained to do that step. And, I think often leaders miss that, right? Reading those signals we're conditioned to. If you take the town hall example that we were talking about a few minutes ago, be manicured, be professional, be the leader of people. And we don't take that time to think about where we're coming from and how it will impact others, right? That um, the power of our position as a leader in an organization, or whether you're the alpha person in a conversation and you just take over those environments. And yeah, you just did a like seriously then, so you got something good.
I did, because I think that's where, that's what, we can call it leadership blindness, right? We're blind to some things either by choice or by circumstance or by positional authority, and people just don't bring those things to us. And so there is this beautiful opportunity, and I think that, like, yeah, pitch, but coaches, right? Like, to have a coach and to be able to work with someone who mirrors kind of what they see coming from you, so that you can have that minute to think, oh, is that how I want to come off? That can allow for huge growth in the individual and the leader and their ability to lead effectively.
I think that so you what you're hitting on for me is seeking feedback, right? Part of having the capabilities of adaptive leadership means that you actively seek feedback in situations. So whether you have a professional coach or it's just asking for a peer of yours that was in a similar meeting, following up that conversation and going to them and saying, how did that sound? How did that come off for you? Or, what did you take from that conversation? And I think some of the best leaders are those who go after that feedback and seek it out.
And I want to go back to something Sara said as the answer for the last question, and it goes back to intentionality too. When you're working with different groups, like all of them are going to be different. They have different people in them. There's going to be different dynamics. Being intentional about how you show up with those groups. There are some groups that you can be kind of a little bit loose and make jokes with. Then there are other groups that want to be more serious and they want to just get down to business, get the conversation over with, and get back to what they were doing. And being able to understand that, to read the room again and know how you need to show up in order to have an effective conversation. And if you realize you show up one way and suddenly you need to switch to another way, being intentional about that and about how you make that switch.
Yeah, being able to do it in a moment. And I think what you're hitting on, David, is, and just to take it from your shirt, you're dealing with humans as a leader. And so we are very unique, every single one of us. And as leaders, we have to understand that. We have to understand that people are coming from their own perspectives, their own background, their own baggage, whatever it is. And our role as a leader is to adapt to them, not the other way around. Sarah said that a few moments ago. It is that servant leadership mentality is to serve the needs of those people. Any last thoughts as we close off here today?
Just that it's so difficult, right? Like, I want to just kind of give an acknowledgement of how difficult this is to do in practice. Sometimes I feel like I can sit on the stage and pontificate and say, hey, we don't do this well enough, or leaders are so and so. But I want to call out, it is hard. It is hard working with humans who are different, with disparate needs, with different ways of understanding things. So like there's also an element of like, for all of the leaders who are out there, you're doing this, and you're if you're listening to this, you're looking to improve kind of on yourself. So just kudos for that.
One of my trainers, Tiagi, says, accept all input. So to what Kim just said, saying it again, this mindset of like, okay, yeah, bring it in. Like, this is all data. This is information. You don't have to agree with the input, but just to accept it, to allow it to come in and know that, like, if we can separate that from being a personalized response to a just like, oh yes, this is just information that I can then work with. Thank you.
Yeah, my 5-year-old recently has started getting an interest in learning how to draw better. And he got a book that like breaks it down into pieces and shows him how to draw. And he asked me to do some parts of it because he said, I'm not good at that. And I told him, I was like, you've got to be willing to be bad in order to get good. And I think that goes to leadership too. You have to be able and willing to make mistakes to get better as a leader. And when you make those mistakes, own them. Say, yeah, that was my bad, and I'm going to learn from this and be a better leader. And I think you'll gain respect from the people you're leading when you do that, as well as being able to respect yourself for the way you're showing up.
Thank you all for joining me today. It was a great conversation. Always lovely to sit with you all as coaches and deep thinkers about how to make work environments better, from leadership all the way down. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.